Welcome to the Future of Us Bookcast, your gateway to insights shaping our future. Today, we're looking at a really fascinating book, Adam Grant's Give and Take. It really makes you rethink what drives success and influence. It argues, pretty convincingly, I think, that long-term success often belongs to people who genuinely add value to others, not just the hyper-competitive types.
Oh, absolutely. It's a vital read for anyone trying to navigate today's world, especially professionally. Grant doesn't just say, be nice. He uses a ton of research to show that how we interact, our default style of reciprocity, is maybe the biggest predictor of where we end up. Are we givers, takers, or matchers? And the results, well, they're often not what you'd expect.
Okay, so let's unpack that core idea first. The book lays out these three basic styles and how we approach give and take in our professional lives. First up, the givers. These are the folks who are genuinely motivated to help others. They share knowledge, make introductions, offer support, often without thinking, okay, what's in it for me right now? They want to see others succeed, sometimes even if it means a bit of a hit to their own immediate goals.
Then you've got the takers. And they're pretty much the opposite. Their main focus is maximizing their own benefit. They see interactions as, a zero-sum game. How can I get the biggest slice of the pie? They're strategic, calculating. If they help, it's usually because they see a clear path back to getting something more valuable in return.
Right. And then there's the third group, where Grant says most of us actually fall, the matchers.
Yeah, the majority.
Matchers operate on fairness, on balance.
Yeah.
It's all about quid pro quo. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. They'll return favors, but they also expect favors back. They're kind of the karmic accountants of the workplace, making sure things stay relatively even. They protect themselves from takers and make sure givers don't just get drained dry.
Exactly. Now, here's where Grant drops the first big insight, the paradox that really drives the book. When he initially looked at the data, especially for short-term metrics, things like grades in school or immediate sales figures, the givers, they were consistently at the bottom.
Yeah, the classic nice guys finish last scenario. It seems intuitive, almost.
Yeah.
The book gives some, almost painful examples of this, like that study of Belgian medical students, over 600 of them.
Oh, yeah, that one's striking.
The students with the absolute lowest grades. Turns out they also had the highest scores on the giver scale. They were spending so much time sharing notes, helping classmates who were struggling, basically investing in everyone else's success.
That they didn't leave enough time for their own studying.
Right.
Their giving directly hurt their individual performance in that context.
And you see the same pattern in something like sales, which is famously competitive. A study at a North Carolina sales firm showed givers brought in something like 2.5 times less revenue per year compared to takers and matchers.
They were too worried about the customer's actual needs. Is this really the best thing for them? They couldn't push the hard sell because their instinct was to help, not just close. So their immediate numbers suffered.
So, okay, the initial picture looks pretty bleak for givers. It seems to confirm that cynical view. You got to look out for, number one, being too generous is a recipe for failure. But, and this is the core argument, Grant finds that givers don't just occupy the bottom rungs. When you look at long-term, sustained success, who's at the very top?
It's the givers again. They
Yeah.
dominate the top and the bottom, the takers and matchers. They tend to clump up more in the middle. They achieve solid, predictable success, but maybe not that breakthrough, lasting impact.
Okay, wait, so givers are both the worst and the best performers. How does that work? What's the evidence for the top part?
Well, look at the same fields where they struggled initially. That engineering study in California. The engineers with the best objective performance scores, looking at things like quantity and quality of work, technical problem solving, the top performers were consistently the givers. Because over time, they build these incredibly strong networks based on trust and goodwill. They help others, share knowledge, connect people. So when they need help or information or support, they have this huge reservoir of social capital to draw on. They can access expertise across the whole organization.
And the sales figures, you said they were low initially.
Right, but check this out. The most productive salespeople, the absolute stars, they were also givers. They averaged a whopping 50% more annual revenue than the takers and matchers.
Wow, that's a huge turnaround.
It really is. It suggests that while naive giving might lead you to the bottom, strategic or perhaps other-ish giving, which we'll get into, is the path to the very top. It completely reframes the game.
So the big question for anyone listening who identifies as a giver is,
Yeah.
how do you make sure you're aiming for that top spot, not becoming a doormat?
Exactly. And that's what the rest of the book explores. It starts with how these different types build and use their networks, which is crucial in today's connected world.
Perfect. Let's dive into Chapter 2, The Peacock and the Panda, How Givers, Takers, and Matchers Build Networks. The core idea here seems to be that in our hyper-connected, transparent world, your reputation follows you, and the old taker strategies just don't work as well anymore.
Precisely. Takers traditionally build networks using a strategy the book calls lekking. It's a term from biology.
Right, like birds doing mating displays.
Exactly. Male animals gather and put on these elaborate shows to attract mates. Professionally, takers do the same. They focus on high visibility, self-promotion, dominating conversations, name-dropping. They collect contacts like trophies purely to extract value later on.
And the book has this almost forensic analysis of how to spot this taker behavior, especially at high levels, using Ken Lay from Enron as a sort of case study. Professor Chatterjee and Hambrick actually studied CEO annual reports to find concrete signs of this lekking.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. They found 3 key indicators. First, language. Takers, because they're so self-focused, overuse first-person singular pronouns I, me, mine, my when talking about the company.
Instead of we.
Right. Extreme takers use these singular pronouns around 39% of the time. The average CEO. Only about 21%. It's like a linguistic fingerprint showing their ego is front and center.
39%. Wow. So almost 4 out of 10 times, it's I did this, my vision.
Yeah.
We're talking about a huge company.
Exactly. Second indicator, the compensation gap. Taker CEOs didn't just earn more, they created huge divides within the company. They earned, on average, more than triple the salary and bonus of the next highest paid executives.
Triple. Compared to what?
Compared to the industry average, which was more like 1.5 times, and their non-cash compensation, like stock options, 7 times higher than the next person. They were grabbing a disproportionately massive slice of the pie, regardless of team effort.
And the third sign? Visuals.
Visual prominence, yeah. Taker CEOs often demanded huge, glossy, full-page photos of themselves in the annual reports, just them looking powerful. And this correlated almost perfectly with analysts rating them as having an inflated sense of self. It's pure visual lekking.
The book uses that great analogy. Takers are like black holes. They just suck energy, resources, credit from everyone around them until there's nothing left.
Whereas givers are like suns. They radiate energy, they create opportunities, they share light and warmth, they make the whole ecosystem richer.
Which is why the rise of the transparent network, LinkedIn, social media, even just email trails and shared contacts is such a problem for takers now.
It really is. In the past, a taker like Ken Lay could burn bridges at one company, move to another, and start fresh. Their bad reputation didn't necessarily follow them easily.
But now
it takes seconds. A quick search reveals shared connections past colleagues. You can ask around. Reputations travel instantly. It's much harder to maintain that facade across different organizations. As the networking expert Wayne Baker says in the book, and this is a great quote, if we create networks with the sole intention of getting something, we won't succeed. We can't pursue the benefits of networks. The benefits ensue from investments in meaningful activities and relationships. It's about genuine connection, not just transactions.
And the ultimate example of the giver approach to networking is Adam Rifkin. The book describes him as this shy, Star Trek-loving, anagram-obsessing software geek.
Doesn't sound like a typical power networker.
Not at all. Yet Fortune named him the best networker on LinkedIn. How? Not through slick self-promotion, but through relentless, genuine giving over many, many years.
His whole approach was, as the book says, building his network little by little, through small gestures and acts of kindness. He just focused on how he could help people, connect engineers, support entrepreneurs, with absolutely zero expectation of getting something back immediately. He even shut down his own successful startup to become a full-time connector.
He really lives this philosophy, captured in another quote. When you have nothing, what's the first thing you try to do? You try to make a connection and have a relationship that gives you an opportunity to do something for someone else. That's completely flipping the taker script, isn't it?
Totally. And this leads to what the book calls generalized reciprocity, or this idea that givers get lucky. It's not always direct tit for tat. Rifkin helped some guy named Spencer way back in 1994, just being helpful. Years later, that same guy, Spencer, made the crucial introduction that helped Rifkin get funding for his own company in 2000. The giving created ripples.
So it's not just about direct exchange, it's about building this positive ecosystem, which links to the final point here. Takers see a fixed pie and try to claim the biggest piece. Givers work on expanding the pie.
Exactly. By sharing, connecting, mentoring, they actually make the whole pie bigger for everyone. They create more value, more opportunities, and eventually they benefit from that richer environment, sometimes getting help from people they've never even met, just because they fostered a culture of giving.
As Grant puts it, givers succeed in a way that creates a ripple effect, enhancing the success of people around them. That's why they often end up at the top. They lift everyone else up with them. Okay, so moving from how networks are built to how work actually gets done, let's look at Chapter 3, Collaboration and Bridging the Perspective Gap. The big idea here seems to be that the whole lone genius myth is, well, mostly a myth, especially in complex fields. And takers, often blinded by ego, really struggle with the collaboration needed today.
Yeah, that's spot on. The book uses Frank Lloyd Wright, arguably the greatest American architect, as a kind of cautionary tale. You'd think architecture is peak lone genius territory, right?
Definitely seems that way.
But Wright went through this period, 1924 to 1933, a 9-year slump where he completed only 2 projects. His productivity just plummeted, like third of times less than usual.
Why the nosedive?
He'd moved to his remote estate, Taliesin, basically isolating himself. He believed his genius didn't need input from others. But in doing so, he cut himself off from these skilled craftspeople, the engineers, the apprentices, all the people he actually needed to bring his complex designs to life.
So his belief in his own singular genius actually undermined his work.
Massively. One of his former apprentices, Edgar Taffel, really hit the nail on the head later. He said, and this is telling, Wright was a great architect, but he needed people like myself to make his designs work, although you couldn't tell him that. Even for a giant like Wright, complex work requires collaboration. That knowledge isn't just in one person's head.
And this isn't just architecture, right? The book shows this applies across fields.
Oh, absolutely. Like cardiac surgeons. Their patient outcomes are significantly better when they work consistently with the same surgical teams in the hospital. It's not just the surgeon's skill, it's the team dynamic, the shared understanding.
And stock analysts.
Same thing. Their star performance often doesn't transfer if they move firms unless they take their team with them or join an equally high-quality team. The expertise resides in the network, the relationships, the collaborative process, not just the individual.
So why do takers struggle so much with this?
A big part of it is the responsibility bias. We all tend to do this a bit, but takers are especially prone to it. It's the tendency to overestimate your own contribution to a group effort and underestimate what others did.
Like the example of married couples estimating housework.
Exactly. Ask each partner their percentage contribution, and the total usually adds up to way over 100%. Same in work groups, the average total estimate often hits 140% or more. Everyone thinks they did the lion's share.
And takers really lean into this.
They do. Think about Jonas Salk and the polio vaccine. Huge achievement, obviously. But the field trial involved something like 1 million kids, thousands of doctors and volunteers. It was a monumental team effort. Yet Salk really soaked up the lone genius's spotlight, didn't actively share the credit as widely as he could have. That's responsibility bias in action.
Is there a way to counteract that bias in ourselves?
The book suggests a simple trick. Before you estimate your own contribution, consciously list out what others contributed first. Just making that mental shift forces you to acknowledge their input. Studies show doing this can actually double how much employees credit their boss's contribution, for example.
That's clever. It forces you to take their perspective.
Yes.
Which brings us to the other big concept in this chapter, the perspective gap.
Right. This is about how difficult it is to truly understand what someone else is feeling or experiencing, especially intense states like pain, stress, or even hunger, once we're not in that state anymore.
Like doctors underestimating patient pain because they aren't feeling it themselves.
Exactly, or remembering how hard something was when you were a beginner once you've become an expert. Takers really struggle here because, again, their focus is inward. They aren't naturally motivated to put themselves in someone else's shoes.
But givers are.
Givers are more driven to try and bridge that gap. Look at George Meyer, one of the key writers on The Simpsons for years. His job involved a lot of cutting, giving critical feedback, potentially ego-bruising stuff.
True.
Yet he created this incredibly supportive, psychologically safe writer's room. How? Because he actively remembered what it felt like to be a junior writer receiving harsh criticism. He used that empathy to deliver feedback respectfully, making people feel valued even when their jokes were cut. A colleague said, everybody who works with him has a George Meyer story, and the story is about how he helped them. That's bridging the perspective gap.
It's harder than it sounds, though. The book uses the gift dilemma example.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. We often give unique, thoughtful, maybe slightly quirky gifts because we think about the giving experience. But when we receive gifts, we usually just prefer something practical off the registry, right?
Totally. I want the toaster, not the handmade interpretive sculpture.
Exactly. It shows how hard it is to shift from our own perspective, as the giver wanting to be unique, to the recipient's perspective, wanting something useful.
But the book also shows we can learn this, even toddlers.
Yeah, the broccoli and goldfish cracker study. 18-month-olds learned to give the researcher the food the researcher liked. Broccoli, apparently, even if the toddler personally preferred the crackers. They could cross that perspective gap incredibly early on. It's a fundamental giver skill.
Okay, so if collaboration depends on perspective taking, how does this relate to spotting and developing talent? That brings us to Chapter 4. Finding the diamond in the rough, the fact and fiction of recognizing potential. The argument here seems to be that givers look beyond just current skills. They search for motivation, for grit.
Exactly. They're talent cultivators. The prime example in the book is C.J. Skender. He's this legendary accounting professor who teaches at both Duke and UNC, apparently. He's that good.
Wow, rival schools.
Right. But his reputation isn't just about debits and credits. It's about his core belief that every single student is a potential diamond in the rough. He looks for the spark, the effort, not just the A-plus grades.
And the Reggie Love story really illustrates this, doesn't it?
Perfectly. Reggie Love was a star athlete at Duke, football and basketball. Had to take Skender's summer accounting class, probably just to fulfill a requirement, you know?
Sure. Easy to dismiss him as just a jock needing a grade.
But Skender didn't. He saw potential beyond sports. He encouraged Love, made sure he actually learned the material, especially stuff like inventory management.
Okay. How does accounting help a future politician's aid?
Well, fast forward a bit. Love gets a job in the mailroom for then-Senator Barack Obama. The office is drowning in mail. Love uses the inventory management principles Skender taught him to create a super efficient system to organize it all.
No way.
Yes. Obama's chief of staff was so impressed by this initiative, this giver-inspired problem-solving, that it led directly to Love getting promoted, eventually becoming Obama's personal aide, his body man, the famous Reggie. All because a giver professor saw potential and invested in it.
That's incredible. It's like the Pygmalion effect in action, right? The self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly. The book revisits that classic study elementary school kids randomly labeled bloomers. The teachers were told these kids had high potential.
Because the teachers believed it.
They treated those kids differently. Warmer communication,
Right.
more challenging work, more feedback. And guess what? The bloomers actually did bloom. Their performance and even their IQ scores went up significantly just because of the teacher's expectations and giver-like behavior towards them.
And this works with adults, too.
Yep. Dov Eden replicated it with Israeli Defense Force trainees. Soldiers randomly labeled high potential performed much better because their leaders subconsciously gave them more help, more career advice, treated their mistakes as learning opportunities. Givers, like Skender, essentially treat everyone as a potential bloomer from the start.
Skender had that amazing quote in a letter to a struggling student.
Oh yeah, the one she kept for decades. Success doesn't measure a human being, effort does. That really captures the giver's focus. It's about the drive, the willingness to learn and contribute, not just the starting point.
Which ties into the idea that interest precedes talent.
Mm-hmm. Those studies on world-class musicians and athletes, their first coaches or teachers often weren't technical wizards, but they were brilliant at one thing, sparking and nurturing interest and motivation. They made it fun, they made the kid fall in love with it. That initial passion is often more crucial than early technical perfection.
Okay, so givers focus on potential and motivation. How do takers approach talent in projects, especially when things go wrong?
Takers are much more vulnerable to escalation of commitment. This is that sunk cost fallacy, right? Sticking with a failing project or decision long after it's clear it's not working, just because you've already invested so much time, money, or ego into it.
Like funding that invisible plane that clearly wasn't working.
Exactly. Takers do this to save face, to protect their image of always being right, always succeeding. Admitting a mistake is too damaging to their ego, so they throw good money after bad.
The book uses Stu Inman, the infamous Portland Trailblazers GM, as an example here too, right? With the NBA draft.
Yeah, poor Stu. He made some legendary draft blunders, drafting LaRue Martin over Bob McAdoo and Dr. J, and most famously drafting Sam Bowie over Michael Jordan.
Ouch. Why?
Because the Blazers needed a center. Bowie's position. Inman focused on the immediate organizational need, a very taker-matcher way of thinking, instead of recognizing the unbelievable game-changing potential in Jordan. He couldn't let go of the perceived need or the sunk costs of previous drafts that hadn't panned out.
Oh, wait, Inman also found some great players later on, didn't he? The hidden gems.
He did, like Jerome Kersey and Terry Porter. And how did he find them? By looking beyond just stats and physical talent. He started evaluating things like work ethic, character, and specifically, a commitment to being a team player, contributing positively to the group.
So even in that high-stakes taker environment, adopting a giver lens for spotting those hidden qualities led to success.
Absolutely. It reinforces the idea that maybe the most important thing you can signal to someone evaluating you isn't just your skill, but your willingness to contribute, your giver potential. As the book says, the most important quality you can show a talent scout is a commitment to giving.
Okay, so we've seen the pitfalls for takers and the potential for givers.
Yeah.
But we also know givers can end up as doormats. So how do they succeed? Let's jump to Chapter 9, Out of the Shadows Becoming an Otherish Giver. This feels like the practical toolkit, right? How to give effectively without getting exploited.
Exactly. This is about becoming otherish, meaning you have high concern for others and high concern for your own interests. It's not selfless, it's not selfish, it's otherish, finding that sweet spot. And a key strategy is using powerless communication.
Powerless. That sounds weak.
Yeah.
How does that help?
It's counterintuitive, I know, but it means relying less on dominance, authority, or pushiness, and more on things like showing vulnerability, asking questions, using tentative language. It actually builds trust and influence.
How? You mentioned the pratfall effect earlier.
Right. That's the psychological finding that when competent people make a small, relatable mistake, like spilling coffee, people actually like them more.
Why on earth?
Because it makes them seem human, approachable. A flawless expert can feel distant, maybe even intimidating. The small blunder closes that gap, increases likability, and paradoxically makes people more open to their influence.
So vulnerability can be a strength, like the lawyer Dave Walton.
Yeah, great example. Brilliant lawyer, but had an occasional stammer. You'd think that's a disadvantage in court. But it made him seem more human, more earnest to the jury. They respected his vulnerability, which made them listen more closely to his actual arguments. He won a massive $7 million verdict, partly because of that perceived weakness that built trust.
Okay, so vulnerability. What else counts as powerless communication?
Asking questions. Expert negotiators, the book reveals, spend way more time asking questions, like over 21% of their speaking time compared to average negotiators, who are down around 10%.
Why ask so many questions?
Because they're genuinely trying to understand the other side's perspective, their needs, their interests. It's classic giver behavior, gathering information to find common ground or ways to create value. Remember that study with opticians?
Oh yeah, the givers outsold the others by a huge margin.
By 30 to 68%,
Right.
Because they asked questions, figured out what the customer really needed, and then tailored the solution, instead of just launching into a generic sales pitch.
Okay, asking questions makes sense. What about tentative talk?
This is about phrasing suggestions carefully, especially when you don't have formal authority. The book uses Don Lane, the ad exec who came up with that great VW slogan, "Drive it, you'll get it."
Right, but he wasn't supposed to pitch creative ideas directly.
Exactly. It was considered stepping on the creative team's toes. A taker might have barged in demanding credit. Lane, being a giver, used tentative talk. He apparently just said something like, "Hey, what do you think of this line?" And crucially, he didn't push for credit.
What was the result?
He built enormous trust and credibility. The creative teams loved working with him because he was helpful, not competitive. That reputation meant he got assigned to the best projects and promoted faster because the top teams specifically asked for him. His powerless approach gave him real influence.
Okay, but what about when givers need to be assertive? Like negotiating their own salary. That seems like a big giver weak spot.
It absolutely is. That's often where the doormat effect kicks in. The book cites that stark statistic. 57% of male MBA grads negotiated their first salary, compared to only 7% of women. Givers often feel uncomfortable, even dirty, advocating strongly just for themselves.
So how do they overcome that?
Through the advocacy paradox. This is brilliant. Samir Jain, a classic high-performing giver, consistently failed to negotiate for himself. He just couldn't do it. until he reframed the negotiation. He stopped thinking about asking for more money for himself and started thinking about advocating for his family's well-being. He needed the raise to support them. By positioning himself as an agent advocating for others, his family, he could be assertive without feeling like a selfish taker.
And it worked?
It worked spectacularly. He successfully negotiated a $70,000 increase in compensation, and his boss respected him more for it because it showed that Samir would fight hard for the things he represented, which also meant he'd fight hard for the company's clients. It maintains the giver identity while allowing for necessary self-interest.
That's a really powerful technique.
Yeah.
But even otherish givers need to watch out for takers, right? How do they protect themselves?
Two key strategies: sincerity screening and generous tit-for-tat.
Okay, sincerity screening, like a BS detector.
Kind of. Jason Geller, a Deloitte partner mentioned in the book, does this. He makes a point of offering help to all new hires a giver move. But then he pays close attention to their response and follow-up. Are they genuinely curious about the work, the team, how they can contribute? Or is it all just about, who should I network with? When's the next promotion cycle?
Ah, so he's listening for genuine curiosity versus purely transactional motives. Giver versus taker signals.
Exactly. And generous tit for tat is about how you respond over time. You start by being cooperative, assuming the best. That's the generous part. But if someone clearly takes advantage, you don't just keep giving. You retaliate proportionally. Maybe you stop offering help or you call out the behavior. That's the tit for tat part. It's about setting boundaries. Like Abraham Lincoln forgiving a rival but warning him not to betray him again.
So you don't become a predictable doormat. Geller used recurring meetings for this.
Yeah, that was his tactic. By having regular check-ins, it becomes much harder for a taker to keep up the facade of being interested or grateful. It requires sustained effort, which takers usually aren't willing to invest unless there's a clear, immediate payoff. It helps sort the genuine givers from the fakers over time.
Okay, one last strategy. Advice seeking. How does that fit into powerless communication?
It's one of the most effective forms. The book tells the story of Annie, a research scientist facing a tough choice: accept a transfer that would derail her MBA studies, or turn down the transfer.
Tricky situation. What did she do?
Instead of demanding her company fix it, she went to her HR manager and used advice seeking. She basically said, if you were in my shoes, what would you do?
Putting them in her perspective.
Exactly. Asking for advice is inherently flattering. It shows you value their judgment. And it forces the advisor to genuinely consider your situation and potential solutions. The HR manager and her department head ended up brainstorming, and they came up with using the company's corporate jet to fly her to her MBA classes.
Wow. Just from asking for advice.
Well, it triggered the Franklin effect. Ben Franklin famously said that someone who has done you a kindness is more likely to do you another one than someone you yourself have obliged. Because the department head invested time and effort in finding Annie a solution, he became psychologically more invested in her success. He wanted to believe she was worth the effort. He even ended up paying for her rental car and other flights later on. Asking for advice turned a potential adversary into a powerful advocate.
Okay, so let's try and wrap all this up. This exploration of give and take really paints a different picture of success, doesn't it? It's not just about raw talent or ambition, but about how we interact, how we manage reciprocity.
Absolutely. The big takeaway is that central paradox. Givers can end up at the bottom if they're not careful, but they also overwhelmingly dominate the top, especially in the long run. And the modern economy, service-based, team-oriented, highly networked and transparent, seems increasingly designed to reward giver behaviors.
The key isn't just being a giver, though. It's becoming that otherish giver, someone who cares about others and looks out for their own interests. Learning those strategies, we talked about sincerity screening, the advocacy paradox, using powerless communication like advice seeking. That's how givers thrive without burning out or being exploited.
And it shifts the focus from the lone genius's myth towards cultivation and collaboration. Success comes from expanding the pie, from spotting and nurturing potential in others, remembering that interest precedes talent, and leveraging the Pygmalion effect by believing in people.
So for everyone listening, let's boil down the key takeaways.
First, success isn't zero-sum. Givers actually create more value for everyone by expanding the pie, and that value tends to flow back through generalized reciprocity. It's a fundamentally more productive approach.
Second, in today's world, your reputation is incredibly visible. Being known as a giver or a taker travels fast and significantly impacts your opportunities. Long term, playing the taker game is just getting harder and riskier.
Third, If you lean towards giving, protect yourself from the doormat effect. Use the advocacy paradox. Frame your own needs as advocacy for your family, your team, or a cause you believe in. It lets you be assertive while staying true to your giver values.
Fourth, when you're assessing talent or potential, look beyond the surface. Look for motivation, grit, character, those giver-like qualities, and remember the power of your own expectations. Treat people like bloomers, and they're more likely to become them.
Fifth, embrace powerless communication. Vulnerability, the pratfall effect, asking genuine questions and seeking advice, the Franklin effect, are surprisingly powerful tools for building trust and gaining influence, often more effective than dominance.
And finally, manage your giving energy. Screen for sincerity. Use generous tit for tat to set boundaries, and maybe focus your giving where you can see the impact that makes it energizing, not draining. Chunking your giving can also help avoid burnout.
Thinking about all this, it raises a really interesting question for the future, especially with technology. If giver behaviors are so crucial for success, and if takers exploit inefficiencies,
Hmm.
what if we could use AI or better collaboration platforms to make low-cost, high-impact giving almost frictionless? Imagine systems that effortlessly connect someone who needs help with someone who has the expertise, or tools that make sharing knowledge or resources incredibly simple. Could we actually design workplaces and networks that structurally minimize the taker's advantage?
That's a fascinating thought. Engineering generosity into the system itself, making it the path of least resistance almost. If the operating system of work is built on trust and reciprocity, well, that changes everything.
It really could. It aligns the infrastructure with what seems to be the most sustainable path to collective success.
Thanks for tuning in to the Future of Us Bookcast. We hope you found inspiration in these ideas. Don't forget to subscribe and share. Together, we're co-creating the world of tomorrow.